Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello students, welcome to this lecture. In last several lectures, we have discussed quantum mechanics and its application to some exactly solvable problems. After solving a few problems that we could do exact solution, we then also enter to those systems where the exact solution of Schrodinger equation is not possible. We also learned how to do how to treat those problems with some approximate methods. Now, we would enter a new part of this course, which is molecular spectroscopy. For this course, we would consider molecular spectroscopy as an application of quantum chemistry, or the topics that we discussed so far and the knowledge that we had, we will use them to discuss about molecular spectroscopy. But I should remind you that molecular spectroscopy is an experimental subject. It is a beautiful experimental technique to probe electronic structure, nuclear structure of the molecular system that we are interested. This is one of those experimental techniques which of course provides us with beautiful intuition about the molecule that we are having, but it also requires a good amount of theoretical understanding to be able to explain this the results of these experiments. So, that is why when we discuss molecular spectroscopy, the theory and experiment go hand in hand. However, for the present course, we would not concern ourselves with the experimental techniques, rather we will see that how we can use the information that we had so far, how we can use the principles of quantum mechanics to talk about the spectroscopy. We will try to learn how we can identify different spectral features, how we can communicate with each other the way spectroscopists do. So, this will be the focus of our discussion in the molecular spectroscopy course. But before that, I would like to take you through some of the important milestones in spectroscopy. Perhaps we can trace back to the Newton's experiments in 1665, where he passed white light to a prism, and then he could the dispersion of light resulted in separation of white light into a range of colors, the famous VIBGYOR, the Vibgyor rainbow colors. So, this was perhaps the first experiment that one did with a light, but until 1860 when Bunsen and Kirchhoff actually used the prism spectroscope as an analytical instrument to probe a molecular system. So, this experiment in 1860 perhaps is the first spectroscopic technique for molecular characterization. So, this is also an important milestone. During this time, all the spectroscopic experiments that were being carried out, they all involved the visible light, because we can the detector our eyes are the detector for these experiments. So, the presence of a particular color or the absence of a particular color was interpreted, and then a reason was given why this particular color is present or why this particular color is absent, and this is how the spectroscopy were carried out. Another milestone in this field is Balmer's contribution in 1885, where he by then we already had the emission spectrum of hydrogen atom, where there were like several well separated lines followed by a dense region of lines, and then a gap and so on. So, you have already seen hydrogen atoms emission spectra. So, Balmer was the first person to have this idea that this spectral signature or the position of these lines could perhaps be fitted to a mathematical formula. This is an important innovation in this field, because this opened up the field of using mathematical techniques to interpret spectra. So, therefore, Balmer's contribution is quite important in that sense. Of course, we discussed that after Balmer's fitting, we had Lyman, Paschen, and finally Rydberg, who looked at the hydrogen atoms emission lines and then provided mathematical formula, and finally Bohr with his Bohr's atomic model could explain all the emission lines in hydrogen atom, at least through his atomic model. And we also saw that when we go beyond Bohr's atomic model and enter the quantum mechanical formalism, we can also use it for many electronic system, and then the solution becomes more general to be applicable to wide variety of systems. Before 1926, when the famous Schrodinger equation came about, before that or around that time, all the explanation to these spectroscopic experiments were given through classical mechanics. In our previous classes, we also discussed when we use classical mechanics, we run into trouble in explaining several spectroscopic features. So, the explanations that we had before quantum mechanics was firmly footed were all they had severe limitations, but once we started appreciating quantum mechanics, then the explanation or the interpretation of the spectral features became more solid. However, the calculations that were required to be able to explain the spectral features were very complex. As we discussed that beyond hydrogen atom, we could not solve any other more complicated systems quantum mechanically. We could not obtain exact solution of those systems. So, therefore, just by using pen and paper, it was very difficult to do high level of calculations to be able to explain the spectral features. So, therefore, the people who were carrying out these calculations, they had many assumptions and they invoked many approximations to their models, so that the calculations become somewhat manageable. But by making those approximations, many important features were also lost. So, therefore, theoretical interpretation was to a great extent was lagging behind the success that experiments were getting. So, we had a wealth of information coming out of experiments, but we were not able to provide an accurate explanation to what is happening in that case. But the situation changed in 60s, where more and more number of people had access to faster computers. With the help of computers, we could now numerically solve many complicated problems, and then using the principles of quantum mechanics by 1960s, these principles were well known, well understood, well accepted. So, the principles were there. Now, with the computational tools, we could do also complex calculations, and then quickly the computation and the theoretical side of molecular spectroscopy evolved, and in the present days, both theory simulation as well as laboratory experiments, they go hand in hand. Sometimes one leads the other, but they have come to a situation where they have realized that experiment and theory, they have to live together for a fuller understanding of molecular spectroscopy. So, keeping this in mind, we would go ahead and see what exactly do we mean when we do this spectroscopy. When we do spectroscopy, of course, we have this in our mind, that we allow electromagnetic radiation to interact with the molecule or the matter that is of our interest. So, first we will spend some time in talking about what is this electromagnetic radiation and why is it called so. Light, for example, we use the term light interchangeably with electromagnetic radiation. But light also is sometimes used only to the visible part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So, light is also an electromagnetic radiation. The general definition of electromagnetic radiation is that when this radiation is propagated, for example, along the axis of propagation, which I am calling x here. So, x is the axis of propagation of this electromagnetic radiation. When the radiation is propagated along one particular axis, it creates an electric field that gives rise to the term electro in this electromagnetic. So, it creates an electric field along the it creates an electric field which is perpendicular to the direction of propagation. So, you can see, so if my propagation direction is x, so I am plotting the electric field along y axis. So, you can see the electric field is given as a sinusoidal function. Not only it produces an electric field perpendicular to the direction of propagation, it also produces simultaneously a magnetic field, which is again perpendicular to the direction of propagation as well as perpendicular to the direction of the electric field. So, therefore, if direction of propagation is given in x axis, the electric field is given in y axis. So, we are providing the magnetic field along z axis. So, you see this the magnetic field is given along the z axis. So, when electromagnetic radiation is propagated along one axis, it produces an electric field and a magnetic field which are perpendicular to each other as well as perpendicular to the direction of propagation. This gives rise to electric and magnetic radiation, and therefore, we call that electromagnetic radiation. Of course, one thing you should see that the waveform of this electric field and the magnetic field which is shown here, you can see that they are always in phase. Now, when we apply electromagnetic radiation to the matter, the electric field and the magnetic field that the electromagnetic radiation has, those fields they interact with the molecule or the electrical and magnetic moments of the molecule that we are shining this radiation on. So, when electromagnetic radiation falls on matter, what happens? So, this is what is we are going to discuss. Now, matter or the molecules can absorb or emit these radiations. So, here when we talk about molecule, of course, now we are invoking the knowledge of quantum mechanics that we have. So, when we are talking about molecule, we know that the molecules exist in certain wave functions, certain discrete energy levels. So, we are starting from let us say an energy level EM, which is a quantum mechanical state defined by a particular wave function. So, this is a stationary state. And it goes from one stationary state to another stationary state when it absorbs radiation or emits radiation. So, the spectroscopic transition that we are going to discuss is always from one stationary state to another stationary state. Now, the state that we are talking about, this could be any state. For example, if we are talking about an atom, hydrogen atom, this state can be the electronic wave function of the hydrogen atom. If we are talking about a harmonic oscillator, it can be one of the eigenfunctions of harmonic oscillator problem, or if it is a particle in a box problem, then it can be one of those eigenfunction and eigenvalue of the particle in a box. So, once we know what is the model or what is the system, we solve the problem quantum mechanically. By solving this, we of course obtain the wave functions and the eigenvalues, the energies. Once we have the wave functions, we know the stationary states, and now electromagnetic radiation, when it interacts with the system undergoes a transition from one stationary state to another stationary state. If it increases, if it goes to a higher energy level or higher energy state, it absorbs energy, and if it goes to a lower energy state, it emits radiation. So, this is how the molecule interacts with the radiation. So, in this diagram, we are discussing three different types of processes. For example, we start with level M. So, EM. When we shine radiation, suppose we are giving this radiation given by the wave number nu bar, whose energy is hc nu bar. So, when this photon is absorbed by the molecule M, it goes to an excited state, M star. The star represents an excited state. It could be an excited electronic or vibrational or rotational state. We will discuss that in future classes. So, it just goes to an excited state. So, this process is called induced absorption. Why is it absorption? Of course, it goes from a low energy state to a high energy state, ground state to excited state. And why it goes? It goes because it is induced by a photon, by an external energy. So, this is an induced absorption. Once it reaches this excited state E n, the m star level, now from there it can have two different pathways. In one pathway, the system spontaneously emits radiation. So, you see m star on its own spontaneously emits this radiation. So, this is an emission process, and by that it comes back to its original state m. So, this process is called emission, and this emission is actually a spontaneous emission given by this second representation in this picture. Alternatively, there is another possibility that when it exists in this m star state, sometimes it on its own spontaneously does not emit and come down to the original state. Rather, it requires another photon of same wave number, and it absorbs one more photon. When it absorbs this photon, it gives rise back to two photons. How does it happen? Because it had already absorbed one photon to go from m to m star. Now, while it is in the excited state, on its own it does not emit, rather it waits until it absorbs one more photon of this the same radiation, and once it does, then it comes down to its this original state m by emitting two photons. Of course, now we see that the net emission is 1 because it has absorbed 1 and emitted 2. So, this is also an emission process, but this emission required the electromagnetic radiation to provide one more photon. So, therefore, this emission was induced by the electromagnetic radiation. So, therefore, we call this as induced emission. So, we have induced absorption, with which it goes from the ground state to the higher excited state. From the higher excited state, it can spontaneously emit, or it can absorb one more photon and then emit. So, the first process is spontaneous emission, the second one is induced emission. Now, we will discuss about the rate of change of population between state m and state n. So, in particular, we will pay attention to what happens to the rate of change of population of this excited state n. So, this capital N is the population, and small n shows the subscript small n shows the population of n state n. So, this state. So, this is the population of n state, this is the population of m state. Now, how is this, how is the population of upper excited state changing? This is given by this relation, where the first term is n m, that is the population of the initial level. Why is it important? It is important because unless molecules exist in this starting level, there is no point in shining radiation, because there is no one to absorb that energy. So, therefore, we need to know if a large number of molecules are present in this particular state E m. So, therefore, the initial population of n m is important. If there is no population, we will discuss many cases where the initial population of a particular state is 0 or very low. So, in that case, there is no spectroscopy can be observed. So, therefore, initial population of the m state is given by n m, and then there is some proportionality constant, or this B parameter, which is called Einstein's spectroscopic parameter B. This tells what is the possibility, or what is the probability of for this state to absorb this radiation and to go to this particular state. This parameter B, we will discuss more about it, on which kind of properties it depends. We will come back to this, but at the moment we remember, we keep it in mind that this B parameter tells whether a transition between E m and E n is in principle allowed, or if so, what is the strength of this kind of transition. Now, the third quantity that you see is the radiation spectral density, which is given by this formula. Why do we need this term, the third term? Because this absorption which is happening is induced absorption this absorption is occurring in the presence of this electromagnetic radiation. So, therefore, the spectral density, how many photons are there, how many photons of that particular wavelength are available in our input radiation, it also matters. So, therefore, this is the radiation spectral density. So, if I multiply these three quantity, I get what is called the population rate of change of population of n state because due to induced absorption. So, it starts from m state and goes to n state. Now, once the population builds up in the upper excited state, we know that there are two pathways in which it can come down, it can emit. So, let us look at that effect. First, we are discussing about the induced emission. So, this one was induced absorption, process 1, and now we are talking about the rate of change of population of nth state because of induced emission. So, this is process 3. Now, again what is happening with this equation? First of all, you notice that there is a negative sign. Why? Because we are talking about emission. So, therefore, this process will reduce the population of nth state, the upper excited state, because in this process we are losing molecules from that state to the m state. So, therefore, this negative sign indicates that, and the first quantity is now population in nth state. Why is it nth state? Because now the emission is starting from state n and coming to m. So, therefore, it is important to know what is the population of the starting state, which is given by n n, and then again the same Einstein's coefficient b, but look at its index b n m. We would see that b m n and b n m, they are same for a pair of for a given pair of states. This b parameters, Einstein's b coefficient, can be taken to be equal, and then again we have the third term, which is the spectral density. Why do we again need spectral density? Because in the induced emission process, the system requires one more photon of the same radiation to of the same wavelength to show this emission. So, therefore, it depends on the spectral density. So, all these three parameters are again present. So, now let us look at the third step, because there is one more way through which the n state can lose its population. That process is the spontaneous emission. Now, spontaneous emission, of course, again negative sign suggests that the population of nth level is decreasing. So, that is why negative sign. The next quantity n n is the initial population of the excited state n. So, that we know that that is necessary, and the next quantity is a n m. So, this is another Einstein's coefficient. So, now we have two coefficients, one is a, another is b. Of course, we said b n m and b m n are equal. So, now we have another one, that is a. So, we still have to talk about what are these Einstein coefficients. So, this a coefficient tells what is the likelihood of a state to come from n what is the likelihood for a transition to occur from state n to state m spontaneously. So, this is a n m. We will also as I said, we will discuss what on which parameters it depends. Now, these are the three processes through which the population of nth level keeps changing. In the first, so this one goes with second level spontaneous emission. In the first process, the population builds up. The second and third process, population decays or population goes down. So, at equilibrium, when we see at equilibrium, all the absorption and both the emission processes will saturate, and then what would happen at equilibrium, the rate of change of this population of nth level will become 0. So, we are writing down that equation, that the rate of change of this population of n state becomes 0. How do I do that? We simply add these three quantities that we see here, because in one process 1 we are building up the population, and process 2 and 3 we are reducing the population from n state. So, when we add them add all these three quantities up at equilibrium, this quantity should become 0. Now, this is one equation that we have obtained. Now, there is another part, is that we know that at equilibrium we can use Boltzmann's relation to talk about the relative population of nth level and m level. So, which is given as e to the power minus delta E divided by kT, where K is the Boltzmann's constant, T is the temperature, delta E is the energy difference between En and Em level. So, given that value of delta E, we can use Boltzmann's relation to talk about what is the relative population between the nth state and mth state at equilibrium. Now, we have got these two equations. So, if we plot, if we put this equation in the previous equation, we obtain this relation which says that the Einstein's coefficient A is related to Einstein's coefficient B, and it depends of course on some constant, but it also depends on this wave number. So, you note here it depends on the nu bar to the power 3. So, therefore, at higher wave numbers, the A coefficient is much more significant than B coefficient. So, therefore, the spontaneous emission becomes more important than the induced emission. Okay. So, now we have what we talked about these A and B parameters. So, we rest everything we understood what they are, but we still do not know what these A and B. Well, luckily for us, A and B are related. So, therefore, we are going to be as soon as we know something about one of these parameters, the other is readily available. Now, the Einstein's parameter Bnm is given by this formula, we are not deriving it. So, Bnm depends on some constants that you can see, pi or Planck's constant or permittivity of the vacuum, multiplied by some new quantity that we are discussing. This quantity Rnm, or the absolute square of this one, this is called transition dipole moment. This is called transition dipole moment. How is it given? You can see that this transition dipole moment integral shows this is the matrix element of dipole moment operator. So, this is the dipole moment operator of the molecule. The dipole moment of dipole moment of this molecule is responsible for taking this state, taking the system from psi m to psi n. So, from E m to E n, the transition is happening, and why is it happening? It is the dipole moment of the molecule which is interacting with the electric field and the magnetic field of the radiation to show this transition. So, therefore, the spectroscopic transition is given by the strength of the spectroscopic transition is given by this R integral, or the transition dipole moment integral, which is a very important quantity in the spectroscopy. We will come back to this expression again and again. It simply says that it is the dipole moment of the molecule that allows the molecule to interact with radiation and therefore show a particular transition. Now, this dipole moment of the molecule, why does a molecule have dipole moment? Of course, it has a nuclear charge distribution, it has electronic charge distribution. So, therefore, it develops a dipole moment. So, if a molecule does not have dipole moment, of course, we would have a difficulty in looking at this spectroscopy, because Rnm, or the transition dipole moment square, is actually the B coefficient, which is proportional again to the intensity of the spectrum. So, therefore, transition dipole moment integral is something that we would require it very often. Depending on the value of this transition dipole moment, we derive the so called selection rules. So, if for some reason Rnm becomes 0, then we see that this particular transition is spectroscopically forbidden, or it is not allowed, or the state is a dark state, that means we cannot spectroscopically probe it if the transition dipole moment becomes 0. So, of course, the total dipole moment has 3 components, Cartesian components mu x, mu y and mu z. So, all 3 components will contribute unless we are sending a polarized axis polarized or a plane polarized radiation. In that case, of course, only a corresponding component of the dipole moment will interact with the electromagnetic radiation. Now, the molecule would have dipole moment either from electric region or for magnetic. So, it can have electric dipole moment or magnetic dipole moment. In most of our discussion, we will see that we will be concerned about the electric dipole moment, because interaction of the electric dipole moment of the molecule with the electromagnetic radiation is the strongest compared to the magnetic dipole moment or even electric quadrupole moment. So, therefore, most of our selection rule or transition dipole moment integral that we will discuss in the future classes will focus on the electric dipole moment of the molecule. So, in this class we discussed about the origin of molecular spectroscopy and how we can use the information of quantum mechanics to discuss molecular spectroscopy. We talked about electromagnetic radiation and how a molecule absorbs and emits electromagnetic radiation. We will continue our discussion on spectroscopy in the next class. Thank you for your attention.